Hey there. Tonight we're travelling back, way back, to a time before empires rose from stone and iron, before cities had walls tall enough to scrape the clouds, before warfare became the calculated, brutal science you've never heard about in school. Dim the lights, get comfortable, because you're about to become someone else entirely, someone who lived 2,900 years ago in a land between two rivers, where the air smelled of cedar smoke and bronze, where kings commanded armies that stretched beyond the horizon, and where you, yes, you, are about to witness the birth of something terrifying and brilliant. You won't just learn about siege warfare tonight, you'll live it. You'll feel the leather straps of your armor digging into your shoulders. You'll taste the copper tang of fear in your mouth as you stare up at walls that seem impossible to breach. You'll hear the screams, the cracking of wood, the collapse of stone. This is the story of the Assyrian Empire, the forgotten civilization that turned warfare into engineering, that made cities tremble at the mere whisper of their approach. And you? You're a siege engineer named Ashur-nadin, a man whose inventions would echo through millennia, though history would barely remember your name. So, settle in. Let your mind drift backward through time, past everything you know, into the dust and blood of ancient Mesopotamia. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, what time it is for you right now. And as the story unfolds, feel yourself sinking deeper, deeper into the ancient world where walls were everything, and you learned how to tear them all down. So, dim the lights. You are Ashur-nadin, and you are 7 years old. The year is 879 BCE, though you don't count time that way. You count it by harvests, by floods, by the campaigns of King Ashurnasirpal II. Right now, you're standing in the courtyard of your father's workshop in the city of Kalhu, watching him hammer bronze into shape. The sun beats down mercilessly on your shaved head. Only the sides of your hair remain, as is custom for boys of your class. Your father, Nadine Apli, is a royal metalworker, and today he's repairing a battering ram head that returned damaged from the northern campaign. The bronze is dented, scored with marks from desperate defenders who poured boiling oil down upon it. You watch as he explains each weakness, each point where the metal failed. "See here, boy?" he says, not looking up from his work. This is where they concentrated their fire. The ram crew would have been screaming, burning alive in their own sweat and the enemy's oil. He speaks matter-of-factly, as though discussing the weather. But the ram kept working. That's what matters. The wall fell, even if 20 men died to make it happen. You nod, though the image makes your stomach turn. Around you, the workshop bustles. Apprentices work bellows, keeping fires white hot. The smell of molten bronze and charcoal fills your lungs. This is your world. This is your future. You don't know it yet, but in 20 years, you'll redesign this very ram, making it lighter, faster, and far more deadly. But today, you're just a boy who's learning that walls exist for one reason. So men like your father can teach men like you how to break them. 3 years have passed. You are 10 now, and your hands have grown calloused from working bronze and iron. You've learned to read cuneiform, the wedge-shaped writing pressed into clay tablets, well enough to understand your father's technical diagrams. Today, you're being taken to see something extraordinary. Your father leads you through Kalhu's streets, past merchants selling lapis lazuli from the east and cedar from Lebanon. The city smells of bread baking, animals, and humanity pressed close together. You pass the great ziggurat, its stepped sides climbing toward heaven, where priests make offerings to Ashur, your people's god of war and empire. But you're not going to the temple. You're going to the palace arsenal. Inside, the air is cooler, dimmer. Rows upon rows of weapons line the walls. bronze-tipped arrows by the thousands, spears, swords, axes. But your father brings you to a corner where something massive hulks in the shadows. It's a siege tower, but unlike any you've imagined. The wooden structure rises 3 stories high, covered in wet hides to protect against fire arrows. Inside, you can see the ladder system that would allow soldiers to climb to the top and shoot down into a besieged city. This is what conquered the Phoenician coast, your father says. This is what makes cities open their gates before we even arrive. They see this being built across the plain, and they know. They know their walls mean nothing. You walk around it slowly, studying every joint, every bronze fitting, every design choice. You notice inefficiencies, places where the weight distribution seems wrong, where the wheels would bog down in mud. You don't speak these thoughts yet. You're only 10. But you file them away in your mind, alongside everything else you're learning about the science of breaking cities. You are 13, and today you kill your first man. It's not supposed to happen this way. You're with a training cohort, young craftsmen's sons being taught basic military skills. All Assyrian men must know how to fight, even those destined for workshops rather than battlefields. Your instructor, a grizzled veteran missing 3 fingers, has taken your group outside the city walls for archery practice. That's when the Aramaean raiders appear over the ridge. Just 6 of them, desperate men hoping to steal supplies from the practice grounds. They're thin, poorly armed, probably from a village your army destroyed last season. They're not expecting resistance from boys. They're wrong. Your instructor shouts orders. You knock an arrow with trembling hands. You've shot at targets 1,000 times. Woven reed figures that don't scream, don't bleed. The nearest raider is running toward you, perhaps 30 paces away, screaming something in a language you don't understand. His sword is raised. His face is contorted with rage and desperation. You draw. You aim. The bow technique your father taught you, the one used by siege engineers who must shoot from platforms while enemies shoot back, comes automatically. Breathe out. Release. The arrow takes him in the chest. He staggers, looks down at the shaft sprouting from his ribs with almost comic surprise, then falls. Just falls. Like a sack of grain dropped from a cart. You stand there, bow still raised, staring. The other raiders are killed or driven off within minutes. Your instructor claps you on the shoulder, says something about bravery, but you're not hearing him. You're watching the raiders' blood soak into the dry earth, turning it dark. You're thinking, walls protect people from this. Walls keep this away. And you're learning. Breaking walls means bringing this to everyone inside. You are 16 and you're experiencing your first siege. Not as a fighter, you're here as an apprentice engineer, watching, learning, sketching everything in your wax tablet. The city is called Tushan, a rebellious vassal that refused tribute. King Ashurnasirpal II has brought 20,000 soldiers, and you're among the 100 engineers and craftsmen supporting the assault. The city's walls are impressive, mud brick reinforced with timber, 30 feet high, with towers every 100 paces. You're standing safely behind the siege lines, but safely is relative. Arrows fall from the walls occasionally, forcing everyone to maintain shield coverage. The air is thick with smoke from the cooking fires of 20,000 men. The smell is overwhelming. Unwashed soldiers, animal dung, rotting food scraps, and underneath it all, the sweet, sour stench of bodies that have been left in the sun too long. Your master, an old engineer named Shamash Ariba, points out everything. See how they've reinforced the gate? Double timber, bronze banding. The ram would take hours there. But look at the eastern wall. See how it's slumped slightly. Water damage to the foundation. That's where we'll concentrate our miners. You sketch it all. the siege tower under construction, requiring 20 trees from the nearby forest. The ram being assembled, its head shaped like a spear rather than a blunt instrument. Shamash Ariba's innovation. The tunnel entrance being dug, where men will soon be crawling underground like worms, shoring up the tunnel with timber as they go, heading for that weakened eastern wall. At night, you lie in your tent and listen to the sounds. Men talking, laughing, gambling. The defenders on the walls shouting insults. Somewhere, someone is crying. And you're learning the most important lesson. Sieges aren't fast. They're not glorious. They're simply work. Brutal, methodical, patient work. You are 16 and you're experiencing your first siege. Not as a fighter, you're here as an apprentice engineer, watching, learning, sketching everything in your wax tablet. The city is called Tushan, a rebellious vassal that refused tribute. King Ashurnasirpal II has brought 20,000 soldiers, and you're among the 100 engineers and craftsmen supporting the assault. The city's walls are impressive, mud brick reinforced with timber, 30 feet high, with towers every 100 paces. You're standing safely behind the siege lines, but safely is relative. Arrows fall from the walls occasionally, forcing everyone to maintain shield coverage. The air is thick with smoke from the cooking fires of 20,000 men. The smell is overwhelming. Unwashed soldiers, animal dung, rotting food scraps, and underneath it all, the sweet, sour stench of bodies that have been left in the sun too long. Your master, an old engineer named Shamash Ariba, points out everything. See how they've reinforced the gate? Double timber, bronze banding. The ram will take hours there. But look at the eastern wall. See how it's slumped slightly? Water damage to the foundation. That's where we'll concentrate our miners. You sketch it all. The siege tower under construction, requiring 20 trees from the nearby forest. The ram being assembled, its head shaped like a spear rather than a blunt instrument. Shamash Ariba's innovation. The tunnel entrance being dug, where men will soon be crawling underground like worms, shoring up the tunnel with timber as they go, heading for that weakened eastern wall. At night, you lie in your tent and listen to the sounds. Men talking, laughing, gambling. The defenders on the walls shouting insults. Somewhere, someone is crying. And you're learning the most important lesson. Sieges aren't fast. They're not glorious. They're simply work. Brutal, methodical, patient work. You are 19 and you're being given your first independent project. King Ashurnasirpal II has died, and his son, Shalmaneser III, has taken the throne. The new king is even more ambitious than his father, planning campaigns that will stretch from the Mediterranean to the Zagros Mountains. He needs better siege equipment, and your master, Shamash Ariba, has recommended you to design it. You're in the royal workshop now, standing before a clay model of a battering ram. Your ram, designed from scratch. 5 years of observations, measurements, and nightmares have gone into this design. It's lighter than the old rams, using bronze bracing instead of solid wood. The ram head itself is shaped like a spear point, designed to concentrate force on a single point of wall rather than distributing impact across a broader surface. The frame is covered in bronze plates rather than wet hides, making it fireproof but still mobile. But the real innovation is underneath. You've designed a suspension system, leather straps that absorb the shock of the ram's swing, protecting the men inside from the bone-jarring recoil that used to cripple operators after hours of work. It means a crew can operate longer, hit harder, tire slower. The Royal Engineers are examining your model, and you're trying not to shake. These men have 40 years of experience. They're war-hardened, practical, skeptical of young innovators. One of them, a massive bearded man named Adad Narari, circles your model 3 times without speaking. Finally, he grunts. The suspension might work. The bronze covering will make it heavy. The wheel design is clever. Wide enough for mud, narrow enough for rocky ground. But there's one problem. He looks at you directly. You've never seen this ram fail. You've never watched it break apart with men inside. Design looks good on clay, boy. Blood tells the truth. He pauses. Build it. We'll test it at the next siege. If it works, you'll be rich. If it fails, those men's deaths are yours to carry. You are 20, and your ram is being tested in real combat. The target is a Syrian city-state called Al-Sir, whose king made the mistake of forming an alliance against Assyria. You're here with a construction crew, builders, and a ram team of 20 men who will operate your design. They're volunteers, extra pay for being the first to test new equipment. They're also nervous. Equipment failures during sieges are notoriously fatal. It took 6 weeks to build the ram from your specifications. Cedar wood from Lebanon, bronze plates hammered in your father's workshop, leather suspension straps from the royal tannery. The wheels are iron-banded hardwood, designed to distribute weight and resist braking. The whole machine weighs less than the old rams, but hits harder. At least, that's the theory. Now it's rolling toward Al-Sir's gates. You're walking alongside it, clipboard in hand, noting every detail. The wheels handle the rocky approach well. The bronze plates reflect the morning sun, making the ram gleam like a moving fortress. Inside, the crew begins their rhythm. Pullback, release, swing, impact. The bronze spear point slams into the gate with a sound like thunder. The defenders respond immediately. Arrows rain down, clattering off the bronze plating. You watch with clinical detachment. The plates hold. Then comes burning oil, poured from above. The oil sheets off the bronze, pooling on the ground. No fire catches. The old rams would be burning by now, men screaming as flames found gaps in wet hides. Your ram just keeps working. Impact, impact, impact. The rhythm is hypnotic. You're counting strikes, timing the crew's endurance. They're lasting longer than old ram crews. The suspension works. After 90 strikes, you hear a different sound. Cracking. The gate's timber is splitting. After 115 strikes, the gate collapses inward. Your ram has worked. The crew emerges, exhausted but alive, unburned. Adad Nirari, watching from nearby, nods slowly. "You'll be rich, boy," he says. You are 23, and you're designing something that will change warfare forever. Not just for Assyria, for every empire that comes after, for the next 3,000 years. You're inventing the siege tower that moves. Previous siege towers were stationary, built near walls but unable to reposition. Your design will be mobile, a 3-story wooden tower on wheels, protected by bronze plating and wet hides, carrying 30 archers and 10 spearmen who can shoot down into a city while approaching the wall. The tower contains an extendable bridge that drops onto the wall top, allowing assault troops to pour directly onto the battlements. But the real challenge isn't the tower itself, it's making it mobile. A structure that tall, carrying that much weight, needs to move across rough terrain without tipping over, bogging down in mud, or collapsing under its own mass. You've been working on this problem for 8 months, filling clay tablets with calculations, building small models, testing weight distribution ratios. You're in your workshop now, your own workshop, earned with the wealth from your ram design. Your father works here sometimes, retired from royal service, but still teaching you metallurgy secrets. Today, you're explaining your tower design to a carpenter named Nabu Shum, a genius with wood who understands structural integrity like some men understand music. The wheels must be 6 feet in diameter, you're saying, pointing at your drawings. Anything smaller sinks into soft ground. The tower frame is hollow, maximum height with minimum weight. Troops climb internal ladders here and here. The bridge mechanism uses counterweights, so 2 men can drop it, not 20. Nabu Shum studies your diagrams, his weathered face creased in concentration. "This will take 200 trees," he says finally. "It will cost more than 10 rams. It will take 2 months to build, but it will work." He looks at you seriously. "It will also terrify defenders. They'll surrender just seeing this being constructed." You nod. Terror, you've learned, is as effective as bronze. Maybe more so. You're 25, and you're watching your mobile siege tower approach enemy walls for the first time. The city is called Dabigu, another rebellious Syrian vassal, and its king has foolishly decided to resist Assyrian authority. King Shalmaneser III has brought 30,000 soldiers, and your tower is the centerpiece of the siege plan. The tower took 70 days to construct, requiring engineers, carpenters, and laborers working in shifts. It stands 40 feet tall, higher than Dabigu's walls by 10 feet. The structure is covered in wet hides soaked that morning, protecting against fire arrows. Bronze plating covers the front face. Inside, 30 archers and 10 assault troops are climbing the internal ladders to their positions. You're mounted on a horse, your first horse, a privilege of your elevated status, watching from a slight rise. The tower is being pushed by oxen teams, guided by soldiers, rolling slowly across the rocky plain toward the wall. It moves at the speed of a walking man, steady and inexorable. You can see defenders on the walls, pointing, shouting. Some are already fleeing their positions. The tower takes 3 hours to cross the 500 paces to the wall. Arrows fall constantly, thudding into the wet hides, pinging off bronze plates. Nothing penetrates. Fire arrows embed in the hides but don't catch. The water does its work. Your archers begin shooting from the top level, clearing the wall section ahead. Defenders fall, or flee, or duck behind merlons for cover. Then the tower reaches the wall. You hold your breath. The bridge-dropping mechanism activates. A massive wooden ramp swings down from the second level, slamming onto the wall top with a crash you hear even from a distance. Assault troops surge across, 10 men in heavy armor running from tower to wall in seconds. The wall section is taken before defenders can organize resistance. Troops pour behind, widening the penetration, and within an hour, Dabigu's gates are opened from inside. The tower cost a fortune. It took months to build. It worked for exactly 1 hour, and it won the siege in that hour. You are 28 and you're teaching. King Shalmaneser III has established a formal military engineering school, and you've been appointed head instructor. 20 young men, sons of craftsmen, minor nobles, and military families, sit before you in a palace classroom, learning the science you've spent your life developing. Today's lesson is about mining operations, the art of tunneling beneath enemy walls. It's less glamorous than siege towers and rams, but often more effective. You're drawing diagrams on a clay tablet, while an assistant copies them onto a larger board for the students. Mining is patience, you tell them. You dig from a concealed position, always at night. The tunnel is 4 feet high, 3 feet wide, just large enough for men to pass through crawling. You shore it with timber every 3 paces. You aim for the wall foundation, but you must calculate the angle correctly. Too steep, you'll surface too soon. Too shallow, you'll miss the wall entirely. One student, a sharp-eyed young man named Nabu Rahman, raises his hand. "Master Ashur Nadine, how do you know where you are underground? How do you navigate without seeing?" You smile. It's a good question. String lines and measuring. You count every pace, mark every turn. Before you dig, you survey above ground, marking distances with cord. Underground, you follow the same measurements. It's mathematics, not guessing. You pause. And when you finally reach the wall foundation, you pack the tunnel with oil-soaked wood, light it, and run. The fire consumes the timber supports, the tunnel collapses, and if you've calculated correctly, the wall comes down with it. Another student asks, how long does it take? 40 days for a small city, 90 for a major fortress. It depends on rock, soil type, water table, and how well the enemy is surveying for mining operations. They'll send counterminers if they detect you, men who dig down from inside, trying to collapse your tunnel or fight you underground. Then it becomes a war beneath a war. You let that image sink in. Most of you will command mining operations someday. Some of you will die in them. Pay attention. You are 31 and you're experiencing your first siege failure. Not failure of equipment, failure of will. The city is called Karkar, and it's part of a coalition of 12 kingdoms allied against Assyria. King Shalmaneser III has brought his largest army ever. 47,000 soldiers, 1,200 chariots, siege equipment including 4 of your mobile towers. But Karkar is ready. The coalition has brought its own army, estimated at 50,000 men. They meet you in open battle before the siege even begins, and the result is unclear. Both sides claim victory. Both sides retreat. Both sides suffer catastrophic casualties. You watch from the engineering lines, safe from direct combat, but you see the chariots shatter against infantry formations. You see cavalry charges break and reform and break again. You hear the screaming that goes on for hours. When the armies finally separate, your siege equipment remains untouched, but King Shalmaneser III orders a withdrawal. The siege is abandoned. Karkar stands. For the first time in your career, your machines don't get used. All that preparation, construction, and expense, wasted. You're standing among the unused siege towers as the army breaks camp, and you're feeling something you haven't experienced before. Professional humiliation. Your engines are proven, your designs work, but they only work if the army gives you a city to break. And today, the army couldn't deliver one. Adad Nirari, now an old man with white in his beard, finds you there. Stop sulking, he says. This is warfare, boy. Sometimes the siege doesn't happen. Sometimes the city is too strong. Sometimes the king changes his mind. Your machines are perfect. The situation was impossible. Learn the difference. But you can't shake the feeling. You've spent your entire life learning to break cities, and you're realizing that sometimes walls aren't the problem. Sometimes the armies outside the walls are, and there's no engineering solution for that. You are 34, and you're working on a problem that's haunted you since Karkar. Siege equipment is effective, but it's expensive and slow to construct. Each tower takes months to build, requires hundreds of trees, and can only be used once before it's burned or destroyed. There must be a better way. You're experimenting with prefabrication. In your workshop, now 3 times the size it was when you started, employing 40 craftsmen, you're designing siege engines that can be partially built in Assyria, transported in pieces, and assembled on site. The concept is revolutionary. Instead of cutting trees near the siege site and starting from scratch, you'll arrive with pre-cut timbers, pre-drilled joints, bronze fittings already shaped, and assembly plans that trained crews can execute in days rather than months. You're testing a prototype ram, smaller than your previous designs, but lighter and faster to assemble. The frame breaks down into 12 sections. The ram head and its suspension system are one self-contained unit. The bronze plating attaches with standardized bolts. 2 skilled crews can assemble the entire ram in 4 days. Your father, now 70 and working part-time in your workshop, watches you work. You're changing something fundamental, he observes. Speed. You're making siege warfare faster. He's right. faster construction means faster sieges. Faster sieges mean more cities can be reduced in a single campaign season. More cities reduced means larger empires, more conquest, more everything. Your innovations aren't just making sieges more effective, they're making them more frequent. Is that a good thing? You ask him. He's quiet for a long moment. Good for Assyria, he says finally. Good for kings and generals. Good for engineers like us. He pauses. Not so good for people standing on walls. You don't argue, you just keep working. Because this is what you were trained for, what you're good at, what you're paid to do. The Empire needs better siege weapons. You're providing them. The moral complexity of that equation isn't your concern. Or at least, that's what you tell yourself. You're 37 and you're conducting your first long-range campaign. King Shalmaneser III has decided to push deeper into Anatolia than any Assyrian army has ventured before. The logistics are staggering. 40,000 soldiers marching for 3 months, carrying supplies for a half-year campaign. And you're bringing prefabricated siege equipment for the first time in military history. The siege train is impressive. 20 wagons carry disassembled rams, 12 rams total, each broken into component parts. 10 wagons carry tower sections, 2 complete towers, ready for assembly. 50 wagons carry tools, bronze fittings, rope, hides, oil, and the 1,000 other items needed for siege operations. 200 oxen pull the wagons. 500 men are dedicated just to maintaining and guarding the siege equipment during the march. You're traveling with the siege train, mounted on your second horse, supervising the logistics. Every day brings new challenges. A wagon breaks an axle crossing a river. You spend half a day doing repairs. Rain turns roads to mud. Wagons bog down, requiring entire companies of soldiers to push them free. Bandits attack supply lines at night. You lose 2 wagons of timber to fire before guards can respond. But the strategy works. When you arrive at the first target city, a Hittite fortress called Kiraka, your crews assemble a ram in 5 days and a siege tower in 11 days. The fortress falls in 3 weeks, faster than any comparable siege in Assyrian history. The king is impressed. Your prefabrication system is validated. You move to the next target, then the next. 3 cities fall in a single campaign season. Traditional siege doctrine would have taken 3 years to achieve the same result. You're revolutionizing warfare through logistics and engineering. Speed is becoming Assyria's new weapon. But at night, lying in your campaign tent, you sometimes calculate a different number. 3 cities, average population 3,500 each. Say 5% casualties during the sieges, defensive losses, civilian deaths during assaults, executions of rebellious leaders. That's 525 people dead because your equipment made the sieges faster and more efficient. You try not to think about it. Mostly you succeed. You are 40 and you're training your replacement. Not because you're retiring, you have at least another decade of active service ahead, but because King Shalmaneser III has been clear. Your knowledge must be preserved, systematized, and passed on. You can't be the only person in Assyria who understands advanced siege engineering. His name is Bel-Haran Shadua, and he's 22 years old, brilliant and intimidatingly ambitious. He's the son of a general, educated in mathematics and engineering from childhood, and he looks at your designs with the eye of someone who sees how to make them better. You should be threatened. Instead, you're impressed. You're taking him through a complete siege operation at a Eurasian fortress called Musasir. The siege is proceeding normally, rams battering the gates, towers being assembled, miners working on the eastern wall. But you're using the siege as a classroom, explaining every decision, every calculation, every backup plan. The tower will take 18 days to finish, you tell him, pointing at the construction site. The ram will breach the gate in 25 days. The mine will collapse the wall in 32 days. 3 different timelines, 3 different approaches. Why? Bel-Haran Shadua thinks. Redundancy. If one fails, the others continue. And the defenders must divide their resources. They can't concentrate everything on a single threat. Correct. Now, which one will actually win the siege? The ram. It's ahead of schedule, and gates are always weaker than walls. But the tower creates pressure. Defenders must keep troops on the wall facing it, troops that could reinforce the gate. And the mine creates psychological pressure. They know something's happening underground, but they don't know where. Fear does our work for us. You nod approval. Fear and exhaustion. We can rotate our crews. They can't rotate their defenders. We can eat hot meals. They're rationing supplies. Every day we wait, we grow relatively stronger. That's why siege warfare is patient warfare. We're not trying to overcome the wall with strength. We're trying to outlast the people behind it. Bel-Haran Shadua is taking notes furiously. And you're realizing something profound. You're not just teaching engineering. You're teaching an entire philosophy of warfare. And someday soon, he'll teach it to others. Your knowledge is becoming institutional, permanent, the foundation for an empire that will last centuries. You are 43, and you're experiencing your greatest triumph and deepest doubt simultaneously. King Shalmaneser III has given you an unprecedented honor, command of all siege operations for the entire empire. You're not just designing equipment anymore. You're planning campaigns, selecting targets, coordinating between multiple armies. You've become a strategic asset, a weapon in yourself. The current campaign is the largest siege of your career. The target is Damascus, capital of Aram Damascus, one of Assyria's most persistent enemies. The city is massive, 50,000 people behind walls, 40 feet high and 8 feet thick. King Hadadezer has turned Damascus into a fortress city, the heart of Syrian resistance against Assyrian expansion. You've brought everything. 20 rams, 5 mobile towers, 8 mining teams, 60,000 soldiers, a supply train that stretches for miles. This is the culmination of your life's work. Every innovation, every improvement, every lesson learned, all focused on breaking one city. The siege is in its 4th month now. Your rams have been battering the gates day and night, crews rotating in shifts, never stopping. The towers are positioned at 3 points along the walls, pinning defenders and allowing your archers to clear the battlements. Miners are working on the northern wall, where soil conditions are best for tunneling. But Damascus isn't breaking. The defenders are skilled, well-supplied, and determined. They've countermined successfully, collapsing 2 of your tunnels. They've destroyed 1 ram with a sortie attack. They're enduring arrow fire from your towers and responding with their own. Every day, both sides suffer casualties. Every day, the siege continues. Every day, you're forced to calculate whether victory is worth the cost. You're standing on a command hill, watching operations, when Bel-Haran Shadua approaches. Master Ashur-nadin, the northern mine is ready. We can collapse the wall section tomorrow. You're quiet for a long moment, watching the city. Somewhere in there, 50,000 people are living under siege, starving, sick, terrified. And tomorrow, you'll bring their wall down, and soldiers will pour through, and many of those 50,000 will die. Because you're good at your job. Because you've spent your life becoming better at your job. Because your job is breaking cities and killing the people inside them. Do it, you say finally, because that's what you do, exactly as planned. Your mine was perfection. 60 feet of tunnel packed with oil-soaked timber, lit simultaneously from 3 points to ensure complete combustion. When the supports burned through, 40 feet of wall came down in a thunderous collapse that you felt through the ground from half a mile away. The assault went in immediately. 10,000 soldiers through the breach, expanding the penetration before defenders could form a coherent response. Street fighting lasted 2 days. Brutal, close combat through Damascus's narrow streets, house to house, room to room. You weren't there. You were at your command post, receiving reports, directing reserves, managing the siege's final phase like a craftsman finishing a complex piece. Now it's over. King Hadadezer has fled. The city has surrendered, and you're walking through Damascus's streets with a military escort, surveying the damage, taking notes for future sieges. The practical part of your mind is analyzing everything. War construction techniques, defensive strongpoints, how the mining operation performed, how the breach assault could be improved. But the human part of your mind is seeing other things. Destroyed homes, bodies awaiting burial, women and children sitting in shocked silence amid rubble, smoke still rising from buildings burned during the fighting. A city of 50,000 people, broken because you were good at your job. An old woman sits in a doorway, staring at nothing. She doesn't look at you as you pass. You're just another Assyrian soldier to her, another armed man in a city full of armed men. She doesn't know you planned this. She doesn't know your minds brought that wall down. She doesn't know your career brought you here. Would it matter to her if she did? You keep walking, keep taking notes, because there will be more cities. There are always more cities, and you're the man who knows how to break them. This is what you are. This is what you've become, and you're very, very good at it. You are 46, and you're retired from active campaign service. Not by choice. Your knees have given out from decades of walking battlefields, and your lungs have been damaged by years of breathing forge smoke and siege dust. King Shalmaneser III has granted you an estate near Kalhu, a substantial pension, and the title of Royal Chief Engineer, an advisory position that keeps you influential without requiring you to march anymore. You're working in your private workshop, designing improvements to equipment you'll never use in combat again. Today, you're sketching a new ram suspension system, one that uses iron springs instead of leather straps. The theory is sound. Iron springs provide more consistent force absorption and last longer than leather. But you'll never see it tested. Other men will build it, use it, perhaps die inside it. Your son, yes, you married at 35 to a merchant's daughter, and you have 3 children now. Your son Ashur Nadine Shumi is 15, and he's working beside you. He has your intelligence, your attention to detail, your gift for mechanics. You're teaching him siege engineering, just as your father taught you. The cycle continues. Father, he asks, looking up from his own sketches, how many cities did you break? You have to think about it. You've lost count. I was present at 47 sieges, designed equipment for perhaps 70, trained engineers who conducted hundreds more. And how many people died? You're quiet. You've never calculated that number, never wanted to. Tens of thousands directly, hundreds of thousands if you count starvation, disease, and displacement. You look at him seriously. Does that bother you? He considers. Should it? And you realize you don't know how to answer. Should it bother you? Should you have guilt about being extremely good at your profession? You were following orders, serving your king, advancing your career. Every engineer, every soldier, every citizen of Assyria benefits from the empire's expansion. An expansion made possible by people like you who know how to break walls and cities and people. Yes, you say finally. It should bother you. It should bother you every single day. And then you should do your job anyway, because that's what civilization requires. We are the tools of empire. Well-made tools, effective tools. But never forget what we are. You are 49 and King Shalmaneser III is dying. He's ruled for 35 years, and you've served him for 31 of those years. Your entire adult career has been under one king's reign. The stability of that is something you never properly appreciated until now, when it's ending. The royal palace is in chaos. The succession is disputed. The king's eldest son, Ashur-danin-apli, is challenging the designated heir, Shamshi-Adad. Civil war is brewing within the empire you helped build. The military is dividing along factional lines. Governors are choosing sides, and you're being courted by both factions. Ashur-danin-apli's envoy arrives at your estate one morning. The man is polished, political, offering substantial wealth if you'll support the elder prince. Your siege engines could decide this war, he says. Whoever controls the major fortified cities controls Assyria, and you're the only engineer in the empire who understands how to take those cities efficiently. You listen politely, serve him date wine, and send him away with non-committal pleasantries. The next day, Shamshi-Adad's envoy arrives with a similar offer. More wealth, more promises, more veiled threats about what might happen to engineers who choose the wrong side. You're facing a problem that engineering can't solve. You've spent your entire life serving the empire, but which empire? Which king? These questions never mattered before. There was always one clear answer. Now there are two answers, both claiming legitimacy, both willing to wage war to prove it. That night, you call your family together. Your wife, your 3 children, your aged father who still lives with you. We're leaving Kalhu, you tell them, moving to our northern estate, far from the capital. We're engineers, not politicians. When powerful men fight, tools get broken. I'm not ending my life broken for someone else's ambitions. Your wife is practical. Can we leave? Won't they prevent it? I'm an old man with broken lungs, you say. I'm no use to either side in actual combat. They're courting me for my designs and my reputation, but I'm taking both with me. Let them fight their war. I'm done building siege engines for this empire. You are 51, and you're living in self-imposed exile at your northern estate, while Assyria tears itself apart. The civil war between the royal brothers has been raging for 2 years now. Reports filter north. Cities besieged, battles fought, the empire consuming itself. Your siege engines, built by engineers you trained, are being used against Assyrian cities, manned by Assyrian crews, killing Assyrian soldiers. Everything you built to expand the empire is now being used to destroy it. You're not building anymore. Your workshop sits mostly unused. Your hands shake too much from lung disease for fine detail work. Instead, you're writing. Your son, Ashur-nadin-shumi, now 17, is your scribe, and together you're creating something unprecedented. A complete technical manual on siege warfare. You're dictating while he writes in careful cuneiform on clay tablets. The approach to wall mining requires 3 considerations. First, soil stability. Clay soils require closer timber support, every 2 paces rather than 3. Sandy soils cave easily and must be shored continuously. Rocky soil is slowest to dig, but requires less support. You pause to, and your son waits patiently. This has become your routine. Morning dictation sessions, afternoon rest, evening discussions about theory and application. The manual is growing longer than any technical document in Assyrian history. Everything you know, systematized and preserved. "Why are we doing this?" your son asks during a break. "If you're done with siege engineering, why document it all?" "Because knowledge shouldn't die with the knower," you say. "I've seen too much warfare, caused too much destruction to let that learning vanish. Someday, this civil war will end. Assyria will need engineers again. Better they learn from tablets than from making the same mistakes I did." You pause. And maybe, if all this is written down, someone will read it and realize there must be better ways. Maybe someday, cities won't need walls. Maybe armies won't need siege engines. Maybe knowing how to break cities will teach people why they shouldn't. Your son looks skeptical but keeps writing. And you keep dictating, recording a lifetime of destruction in neat cuneiform rows, hoping somehow that knowledge about tearing down walls might eventually help someone build better ones. You are 53 and the civil war is over. Shamshi-Adad V has won, taking the throne by siege, ironically. Your siege techniques used to capture the cities his brother controlled. 27 years of fighting finally ended. The new king has issued pardons, restored order, and begun rebuilding the empire his family nearly destroyed. And he wants you back. An official delegation arrives at your northern estate, younger engineers from the royal corps, soldiers, and a royal edict written on good clay and sealed with the king's cylinder. The message is simple. Return to Calhu, resume advisory duties, receive additional honors and lands. The empire needs your knowledge. The king commands it. You're sitting in your receiving room, the edict on your lap, surrounded by men young enough to be your grandsons, all looking at you with expectation. You're thinking about the manual you've spent 3 years writing. 60 tablets now, a complete library of siege warfare. You're thinking about the cities you've broken, the people who died, the empire you helped build. "I'm honored by the king's attention," you say carefully, "but I must respectfully decline. I'm an old man. My health is poor. My knowledge is documented in the manual my son is completing. Any engineer can learn from those tablets what I would tell them in person. I've served Assyria for 30 years. Allow me to spend my remaining years teaching my grandchildren, not planning sieges." The delegation leader, a young officer who probably wasn't born when you designed your first ram, looks scandalized. "Master Ashur-Nadin, the king's command isn't a request, it's an order I'm refusing," you interrupt gently. "What will he do? Execute an old man who can barely walk? Strip me of honors I no longer need? Take estates I won't live to fully enjoy?" You pause. "I've broken 47 cities for Assyria. I've trained 3 generations of engineers. I've given this empire everything it could possibly need from me. Now I'm keeping the end of my life for myself. Tell the king I'm deeply honored, profoundly grateful, and completely finished." They leave, unhappy but not hostile. You suspect the king will accept your refusal. You're not important enough to force, and forcing you would set a bad precedent with other veterans. You've bought yourself peace. You hope it's enough. You are 55 and you're dying. The lung disease that has plagued you for years is finally winning. You spend most days in bed now, breathing in shallow gasps, barely able to speak above a whisper. Your family surrounds you, your wife, your 3 children now adult, and 5 grandchildren who don't really understand why grandfather is so quiet and still. Your son, Ashur-Nadin Shumi, has finished the manual. 63 tablets in total, organized by topic: mining, battering rams, siege towers, logistics, defensive countermeasures, and a final section you insisted on: the human cost of siege warfare. Statistics you collected over decades about casualties, refugee displacement, disease, and destruction. Numbers that no other military manual in history has bothered to record because no one else thought they mattered. Will anyone read that final section? Your son asks, sitting beside your bed. You can barely whisper. Probably not. Engineers will skip to the useful parts. But I wrote it anyway. Someone needs to count the cost. Someone needs to remember. You pause for breath. Those numbers are my confession, my accounting. Everything I did, quantified. When I face the gods, I can say, I didn't hide from what I was. Your protégé, Belharan Shadua, visits. He's a senior engineer now, serving the new king, using your designs and innovations. Master, your techniques are standard throughout the empire now. Every siege follows your principles. You revolutionized warfare. You want to tell him that's not necessarily good, that revolution in the art of destruction isn't something to celebrate uncritically, that the efficiency you created has made warfare more frequent, more devastating, more total. But you're too tired. Instead, you just say, use that power wisely. Remember that cities are full of people. He nods, but you're not sure he really understands. He's still young. He hasn't yet learned the weight of what you've carried. Maybe he never will. Maybe that's actually better. An engineer who can design siege equipment without the guilt that has slowly eaten you alive. Your father died 2 years ago, at 79, surrounded by the family he helped build. You're going to join him soon. Your workshop will pass to your son. Your designs will continue serving the empire. And the cities will keep falling, one by one, broken by engineers trained in your methods, using your innovations, following your principles. Your legacy is permanent. You're just not sure it's good. You are 56 and you're in your final hours. The physician, a priest healer from Kalhu who came despite the distance, has said it's a matter of hours, not days. Your lungs are filling with fluid. Your heart is struggling, your body is shutting down, but your mind is clear. Surprisingly clear, actually. And in that clarity, you're seeing your life laid out like a siege plan. All the decisions, all the consequences, all the weight of decades spent in service to breaking things and people. Your wife is beside you, holding your hand. Your children are in the room. And in this moment, you're thinking about the first man you killed, that Aramean raider when you were 13. You've killed thousands since then, though never directly with your own hands. The cities you broke, the walls you collapsed, the sieges you won. How many people died because of your genius? You calculated it once, years ago, and the number was so large you stopped believing it. You're thinking about your father, the royal metalworker, who taught you that walls exist so men can learn to break them. He wasn't wrong, but he wasn't completely right either. Walls exist because humans need protection from humans, and your entire career has been about making that protection useless. What does that make you? You're thinking about your manual, the 63 tablets that preserve everything you learned. Will they help someone? Will they harm someone? Both, probably. Knowledge is neutral. It's what people do with it that matters. You try to include the cost, the human reality of siege warfare. But engineers will skip those tablets. They always do. They'll take your efficiency and ignore your warning. Your son leans close. Father, is there anything you want to say? Any final wisdom? You gather your strength and... Walls protect people. Never forget that. When you break a wall, you're breaking protection. Every time. You pause for breath. Be good at your work, but remember what your work does. Remember who pays for your skill. You close your eyes. The room is quiet except for your labored breathing. And you're thinking about all those cities: Tashan, Alisir, Dabigu, Musasia, Damascus, and the ones you never saw but helped conquer anyway, through designs and innovations and training. The weight of them all settles on your chest, heavier than the fluid in your lungs. You are dead. But your story continues, because knowledge doesn't die with the knower. Your son, Ashur-nadin Shumi, takes your 63-tablet manual to Kalhu and presents it to King Shamshi-Adad V. The king is impressed, perhaps more by the volume and organization than by the content itself, and orders copies made for the royal library. Your manual becomes the first systematized military engineering text in history, preserved in clay, distributed to major Assyrian cities, studied by generations of engineers who will never meet you. Bel-Haran Shadur becomes chief royal engineer, using your designs but adding his own innovations. He develops a lighter siege tower that can be assembled even faster than your prefabricated version. He designs a ram with multiple ram heads that can attack different points of a gate simultaneously. He's brilliant, ambitious, and uncomplicated by the moral doubts that plagued your later years. He breaks cities with the efficiency you taught him and sleeps soundly afterward. Your grandson, your son's eldest child, named Ashur-nadin after you, enters the engineering corps at 16. He's talented, though not brilliant. He studies your manual, builds equipment from your designs, participates in sieges using your methods. He never meets you, but he carries your name and continues your work. The cycle perpetuates. 50 years after your death, Assyrian siege warfare is the most advanced in the world. Your innovations have spread through conquest, through trade, through enemy engineers studying captured equipment and adapting your principles. The Babylonians improve your mining techniques. The Egyptians copy your ram suspension systems. The Phoenicians build their own versions of your mobile towers. Your revolution in siege engineering has become universal. Cities grow taller walls to counter your rams. Defenders develop new counter-mining techniques to stop your tunneling operations. Fortifications become more sophisticated because your attacks became more effective. You've created an arms race that will continue for millennia. And you're not there to see it, lying in a tomb in the northern hills, your body wrapped in linen, surrounded by offerings and your personal tools. A bronze stylus, a measuring cord, a small model ram you built with your father when you were a boy. 80 years after your death, your great-great-grandson is conducting a siege. His name is Nabu-nadin Ahi, and he's never heard of you personally. You're just the old master referenced in the ancient texts, the legendary figure who founded the engineering school, the name attached to the classic designs. He doesn't know you worried about casualties. He doesn't know you struggled with guilt. To him, you're just the genius who made siege warfare efficient. He's using a ram that's fundamentally your design, bronze-plated, suspended, spearheaded. It's been improved over the decades, lighter and faster, but the core principles are yours. He's using a siege tower that's a direct descendant of your mobile tower, built from your prefabrication techniques, assembled in 6 days from wagon-transported components. He's using mining operations that follow your manual precisely. The tunnel dimensions, the timber spacing, the fire collapse technique, all recorded in clay 80 years ago. The siege succeeds, the city falls. Thousands die or are displaced. It's efficient, professional, and successful. And Nabu-nadin Ahi feels pride in his work, just as you did in your youth. He hasn't yet learned the weight you carried. He's still young. The doubt will come later, or maybe it won't. Not everyone learns the lessons you learned. But there's something new. After the siege, Nabu-nadin Ahi is reviewing reports, and he notices something strange in your manual. The final section, the one about human costs and casualties, has been copied differently by different scribes. Some versions include it. Some versions omit it entirely, considering it irrelevant to military engineering. The version at his base has it, but his commanding officer has never mentioned it. It's there, ignored. Nabu Nadine Ahi, curious, reads it. The statistics, the calculations, the careful accounting of destruction you insisted on preserving. And for just a moment, standing in a conquered city, he thinks about what his work really means. Just a moment. Then he goes back to reviewing equipment performance and planning the next siege. Because that's the job. That's what engineers do. But the seed of doubt has been planted, exactly as you intended. Knowledge persists. Conscience whispers, even across generations. 120 years after your death, the Assyrian Empire is at its peak. King Sennacherib has just captured Babylon, using siege techniques that are still fundamentally yours, refined over 5 generations. The empire stretches from Egypt to Persia, from Anatolia to the Persian Gulf. Hundreds of cities have fallen to Assyrian siege warfare, and every major fortification in the known world has been influenced by either your attacking innovations or defensive responses to them. Your manual is now considered ancient text, studied not just for practical application, but for historical significance. Young engineers learn that the old methods are still the foundation. The principles haven't changed, only the implementation details. Your name has acquired a kind of legendary status. Built to Ashur-Nadine's specifications is an endorsement that equipment is properly designed. Following Ashur-Nadine's principles means siege operations are being conducted correctly. But something else has happened. Your manual's final section, the one about human costs, has become controversial. Some military scholars argue it's essential reading, that understanding the consequences of siege warfare makes engineers more responsible and careful in application. Other scholars argue it's demoralizing propaganda, weakening warriors' resolve by making them think too much about enemy suffering. The debate continues in the Royal Engineering School, and your tablets sit at the center of this philosophical argument about the relationship between military efficiency and moral responsibility. In Nineveh's Great Library, a scribe named Nabu Zukup Kenu is creating a new copy of your manual. He's a careful scribe, reproducing each tablet precisely, including that controversial final section. As he copies your statistics about casualties and displacement, he adds a small notation in the margin, not part of the original text, just his personal observation. The master who created these engines also carried their weight. We who use them must do the same. Your knowledge has become wisdom. Your techniques have become tradition. Your guilt has become philosophy. And somewhere in the northern hills, your tomb still stands, unvisited but not forgotten, while the empire you helped build continues its expansion, one broken city at a time, following principles you established and carrying burdens you first named.
200 years after your death, the Assyrian Empire is collapsing.
Babylon has rebelled successfully. Media is rising in the east. Egypt has broken free in the west. The invincible empire you helped build is being torn apart. And ironically, its enemies are using your techniques against it. Babylon is besieging Assyrian cities with rams and towers built from your principles. The Medea are mining Assyrian walls using your methods. Your manual has spread to every corner of the known world, and now it's being used to destroy the empire that created it. In Kalhu, your old home city, defenders are preparing for a Babylonian siege. They're studying your manual too, but from the defensive perspective, looking for weaknesses in the techniques you pioneered. An old engineer named Shamash Nasir, one of the last trained in the classical Assyrian tradition,
is examining the walls and thinking about how you would attack them. He knows your methods so well that he can predict exactly where enemy engineers will mine, where rams will concentrate, where towers will approach. Defense has become a matter of countering your techniques systematically. The siege comes. It follows your principles exactly. Rams attack the gates using your suspension design. Towers approach at the predicted points. Miners dig toward the eastern wall, just as you would have recommended. And the defenders, knowing all this in advance, counter effectively. They drop massive stones on the rams from above, damage the towers with fire at close range, and collapse the mines with their own counter-mining operations. But they can't hold forever. Supplies run low. Defenders grow exhausted. The siege drags on for months, and gradually, inevitably, the city begins to fail. Shamash Nasir, standing on the walls as the final assault begins, thinks about you, the master engineer who created this entire system, the legendary figure who made siege warfare a science. And he wonders, did you know? Did you understand that these techniques would eventually be used against Assyria itself? That your genius would ultimately help destroy the empire you served? The city falls. Kalhu burns. The old workshop where your father taught you metalworking is demolished. Your estate in the city is looted and destroyed. Everything physical that connected to you is erased. Only the tablets remain. Your manual, your knowledge, your principles, being used by the very people destroying your civilization. 300 years after your death, Assyria is gone, completely. The empire that dominated the Near East for centuries has been so thoroughly destroyed that its cities are ruins, its language is dying, and its people are scattered. Future generations will barely remember it existed. But your manual survives. A Persian engineer named Artavadia is studying one of the copies in Babylon's library. Persia is the new superpower, and they're adapting the best techniques from all the conquered peoples. Your Assyrian siege methods are being combined with Median mining expertise and Babylonian logistics to create a new, even more effective siege doctrine. Your innovations have outlived your empire by 3 centuries and counting. Artavadia is particularly interested in your calculations, the mathematics of tunnel angles, the weight distribution formulas for siege towers, the force concentration equations for ram impacts. The technology has improved. Better metals, better tools, better materials, but the underlying principles are still yours. This Ashur-Nadin, Artavadia tells his apprentice, whoever he was, understood something fundamental about walls and force. We're still using his insights. The apprentice asks, what happened to his empire? Artavadia, all empires fall eventually, but knowledge persists. This manual was written 6 generations ago for an empire that no longer exists, yet we're using it to build the Persian Empire. Perhaps 6 generations from now, when Persia is dust, someone else will read these same principles and use them for their empire. That's the strange immortality of useful knowledge. It transcends the civilization that created it. What Artavadia doesn't mention, doesn't even know about, because those tablets have been lost, is your final section about casualties and cost. The moral complexity of your work has been forgotten. Only the technical brilliance remains. You've become purely a mind, a collection of useful techniques, separated from the human being who struggled with their implications. Your genius is preserved. Your conscience is lost. Perhaps that's inevitable. Perhaps technical knowledge always outlasts moral context. Or perhaps some scribe will find those missing tablets someday and remember that behind every efficient siege technique was a man who counted the cost and carried the weight.
500 years after your death, Alexander the Great is using your techniques to conquer the world. He doesn't know your name. Those tablets are too ancient, too obscure. But the methods have been passed down, refined, improved, and systematized through Persian military doctrine, which his Greek engineers have now studied and adopted. When Alexander besieges Tyre, arguably the most famous siege in ancient history, he's using principles you established. Prefabricated towers, mobile rams, coordinated multi-point attacks, patient mining operations. Your ghost is there, unseen, as history unfolds. Your manual, the original 63 tablets, still exists, but only in fragments. Pieces of it are preserved in libraries in Babylon, Persepolis, and Alexandria. Scholars occasionally reference the old Assyrian siege texts, but usually in the context of historical curiosity rather than practical application. The technology has advanced beyond your original designs. Bronze has given way to iron. Siege towers are now enormous, complex engineering marvels. Rams are larger and more sophisticated. But the underlying thinking, the systematic approach, the mathematical calculations, the professional methodology, all of that is still fundamentally yours. An old librarian in Alexandria, a Greek named Demetrios, is cataloguing ancient texts, and he comes across several of your tablets. He can read Akkadian, the language they're written in, though it's considered an archaic skill now. He spends a day reading through your engineering specifications, your mathematical formulas, your careful documentation. Then he reaches the final tablet he has, part of your section on casualties and human cost. Most of it is broken, but he can read fragments. 3,200 dead when the wall collapsed. 1,500 refugees with no supplies. Calculate not just the fall of walls, but the fall of lives. Demetrios makes a note in his catalogue. Ancient Assyrian military manual. Technical content standard for its era, now superseded. Notable for unusual inclusion of casualty documentation and apparent moral reflection by the author. May have historical interest for study of ancient military ethics. Then he shelves the tablets in the section for ancient military history and moves on to the next text. Your moral struggle has been noticed, briefly, by one scholar in a library 500 years after your death. Then it's filed away again, considered interesting but not particularly important. The techniques continue. The weight you carried has been forgotten. Only the efficiency remains, perpetuating through generations of engineers who never question what you questioned. 1,000 years after your death, the Roman Empire is using siege techniques that would be recognizable to you. Roman engineers don't know they're following Assyrian principles, filtered through Persian and Greek traditions, but the DNA of your innovations is still there. The systematic approach, the mathematical precision, the professional organization of siege operations. When Romans besieged Jerusalem in 70 CE, they used towers, rams, and mines in coordinated operations that echo methods you pioneered. Your original tablets are gone now, lost in library fires, buried in collapsed buildings, dissolved by time. No physical trace of your actual work remains. But the knowledge has been transmitted through so many intermediaries, copied and recopied, and translated and adapted, that it's become fundamental to military engineering across the entire ancient world. Your ideas have achieved a form of immortality that transcends any physical record. They've become simply the way sieges are done, so basic that no one questions their origin anymore. A Roman engineer named Marcus Vitruvius is writing a comprehensive treatise on architecture and engineering. He includes a section on siege warfare that describes rams, towers, and mining operations in detail. The technical specifications he gives are direct descendants of your designs, though improved with 1,000 years of Roman engineering innovation. Vitruvius has no idea he's echoing an Assyrian engineer from the distant past. He thinks he's documenting Roman methods,
not knowing that Rome inherited these techniques from Greece, which got them from Persia, which got them from Babylon, which got them from Assyria, which got them from you. And that moral complexity you worried about, that careful documentation of human cost, that's completely absent from Vitruvius's text. He describes siege techniques purely as technical problems, efficient, professional, practical solutions to the challenge of reducing fortifications. The human dimension has been engineered out entirely. Your techniques have survived, your conscience has vanished, the knowledge persists in its most utilitarian form, stripped of the weight you try to preserve alongside it. You've become fully what you feared, simply a tool, a collection of useful techniques, employed without reflection by engineers who never question what they're doing, because the methods are so old, so established, so obviously correct that they seem natural and inevitable. Your revolution in siege warfare has become orthodoxy.
2,000 years after your death, medieval engineers are still using your principles, though they've been so transformed through millennia of adaptation that no recognizable connection remains. Byzantine sieges, Arab sieges, Crusader sieges, Mongol sieges, all employ techniques that ultimately trace back to the systematic approach you pioneered. The specific technology has changed completely. Counterweight trebuchets have replaced human-powered rams. Gunpowder has been introduced. Metallurgy is advanced beyond anything you could have imagined. But the underlying methodology, the careful planning, the multi-point attacks, the mathematical calculations of force and angle, that's still fundamentally your intellectual legacy. Your name has been completely forgotten. Not even a legend remains. Assyria itself is barely remembered, an ancient empire mentioned in biblical texts, but so ancient that it seems mythological to medieval people. The clay tablets with your manual are long since dust. No library preserves them. No scholar references them. You've been entirely erased from historical memory. But here's the strange thing. You won. Your revolution in siege warfare succeeded so completely that it became invisible. Modern military engineers learn your systematic approach without knowing they're learning it. Apply your principles without knowing they're applying them. Think in patterns you established without knowing those patterns have a source. You've become like the inventor of the wheel, so successful that the invention is no longer connected to the inventor, so fundamental that it seems to have always existed. Somewhere in what was once Assyria, now part of the medieval Islamic world, a shepherd drives his flock across ruins. He doesn't know these broken stones were once Calhu, your home city. He doesn't know that beneath his feet, buried under centuries of accumulated soil and debris, lies the foundation of your father's workshop, where you learned metalworking as a boy. He certainly doesn't know that a man named Ashur-nadin once walked here, designed siege weapons, struggled with guilt, and tried to document both his innovations and their cost. The shepherd sits on a stone to rest, actually a piece of your tomb's foundation, broken and displaced and no longer recognizable. He eats his lunch, his sheep graze, the sun sets, and the weight you carried, the guilt you felt, the moral complexity you tried to preserve, all of it is gone, dissolved into the long forgetting that claims all human concerns eventually. Only the techniques remain, transmitted through so many generations that they've become timeless. You've achieved the immortality you never wanted, eternal technical relevance, complete human erasure. 3,000 years after your death, archaeologists are discovering you again. It's 1845 CE, and British and French excavators are digging in Mesopotamia, uncovering the ruins of Assyrian cities that have been buried for millennia. They're finding palaces, reliefs, and libraries, thousands of clay tablets in languages no living person can read. An archaeologist named Austin Henry Layard is excavating Calhu, though he calls it Nimrud, not knowing the ancient name. He's finding remarkable artifacts, massive stone carvings showing Assyrian siege warfare in detail, reliefs depicting battering rams attacking city walls, siege towers rolling toward fortifications,
soldiers mining under walls. These images are showing the technology you pioneered, preserved in stone for 3,000 years, finally being seen again by human eyes. And they're finding tablets. Thousands of tablets. A complete royal library preserved in the ruins of a collapsed palace. Among them, by extraordinary chance, are 3 tablets from your manual. Broken, fragmentary, but still readable by scholars who are just beginning to decipher cuneiform script. 50 years later, in 1895, an Assyriologist named Archibald Sayce is translating one of your tablets. It's from the technical section, describing RAM suspension systems with detailed mathematical specifications. Sayce is impressed by the sophistication. This is advanced engineering from 2,700 years ago, far more sophisticated than anyone expected ancient Assyrians to possess. He publishes a paper on advanced siege engineering in Neo-Assyrian military doctrine. Your name appears in the paper. This tablet appears to be authored by or attributed to one Ashur-nadin, possibly a royal engineer, during the reign of Shalmaneser III. It's the first time your name has been spoken by a human being in over 2,000 years. Sayce doesn't know anything about you as a person, just that you existed, you were an engineer, and you were skilled. The 3 tablets are catalogued and placed in the British Museum, where they sit in climate-controlled storage. Sometimes scholars request them for study. Occasionally they're referenced in academic papers about ancient military technology. You've been resurrected, sort of, not as a human being, but as a data point, a footnote in the history of military engineering, a name attached to some impressive but ancient technical specifications. No one has found the tablets about casualties and cost. Those are still buried somewhere, or more likely, destroyed long ago. The moral complexity of your work remains lost. Only the technical brilliance has been recovered. Present day. You exist now as data, digitized, catalogued, cross-referenced, analyzed by computers as well as humans. The 3 tablets bearing your name have been photographed, 3D scanned, and translated into dozen languages. They're available online. Anyone with internet access can read your technical specifications for RAM suspension systems, written in 855 BCE, in a language that was dead for 2,000 years. A graduate student at Oxford, a young woman named Sarah Chen, studying ancient military engineering, is writing her dissertation partially about you. She's analysed your suspension system mathematically and concluded that it was, for its time, a brilliant application of principles that wouldn't be formally understood as physics for another 2,000 years. You intuitively understood concepts that wouldn't be named until Newton. Your engineering was centuries ahead of theoretical understanding. But Sarah is also frustrated. I have 3 tablets of technical specs, she tells her advisor, and 0 personal information. I don't know if Ashur-nadin was young or old when he wrote these. I don't know if he had a family. I don't know what he thought about his work. These tablets are just floating technical knowledge, disconnected from any human context. He's a name and some equations, and that's it. Her advisor shrugs. That's how most ancient technical writers come down to us. They were engineers, not poets. They documented what they built, not what they felt. But Sarah keeps digging. She's searching archaeological records, looking for any other mention of your name. And she finds something, a brief reference in a damaged tablet from the Royal Engineering School, dated 50 years after your death, mentioning Ashur-nadin, the master engineer's principles regarding casualty minimization in siege operations. Casualty minimization? That's unexpected. That's not in any of the tablets she has. That suggests there's more, possibly a lot more, still undiscovered or lost. You weren't just a technical genius. You were someone who thought about the human cost. You tried to include that in your work. And somehow, that part of your legacy was lost while the technical part survived. Sarah includes this in her dissertation. She argues that ancient military engineers may have had more sophisticated ethical frameworks than modern scholarship assumes, and that the absence of moral reflection in surviving texts might be a preservation bias rather than original absence. She's recovering not just your techniques, but hints of your conscience, 3,000 years late. The future, 50 years from now. Military engineers designing autonomous siege systems are studying your principles. The technology is incomprehensibly advanced. Robotic systems, AI-directed mining drones, self-assembling mobile platforms. But the underlying strategic thinking is still recognizable. How to coordinate multiple simultaneous attacks. How to calculate optimal force concentration. How to systematically reduce fortifications. The questions you asked are still relevant, even if the tools have changed beyond recognition. A military AI researcher named Dr. James Okonkwo is programming assault algorithms, and he's using historical siege data as training examples. Your 3 tablets are in the dataset, ancient examples of systematic siege methodology that the AI will learn from alongside thousands of other historical cases. The computer doesn't care that your tablets are 3,000 years old. Data is data. Success patterns are success patterns. Your innovations are being absorbed into machine learning models that will guide future robotic warfare. Dr. Okonkwo, during a presentation about his work, mentions you briefly. One of the interesting historical cases in our dataset is from an Assyrian engineer named Ashur-nadin, 855 BCE. His systematic approach to siege operations shows sophisticated understanding of force multiplication and resource optimization. The AI identified his techniques as particularly efficient, actually recommending them as optimal solutions for certain fortress configurations. It's remarkable how ancient principles remain valid when the core strategic problems don't change. But here's what's not in the AI's dataset: that you struggled with what you were doing, that you tried to document the human cost, that you retired early because the weight became too much, that you spent your final years trying to preserve not just the techniques, but the moral complexity. All of that is lost information, never digitized, never recovered. The AI is learning your efficiency without your conscience. It's inheriting your brilliance without your doubt. And sitting in that conference room, one junior researcher, a young engineer named Priya Sharma, raises her hand. Dr. Okonkwo, do we have any data on whether historical military engineers experienced moral conflict about their work? Like, did this Ashur-nadin guy ever write about the ethics of what he was doing? Okonkwo checks his notes. Not in any surviving records. These ancient engineers seem to have been purely practical. Document the techniques, not the implications. Why do you ask? Because maybe, Priya says carefully, that's something we should be thinking about now, before we deploy autonomous siege systems. If a guy 2,800 years ago was just focused on efficiency and we're doing the same thing, maybe we're repeating a pattern we shouldn't repeat. The room is quiet for a moment. Then the discussion moves on to technical specifications, but the question hangs there, unanswered. The far future, 500 years from now, humanity is establishing off-world colonies and they're encountering a problem you would recognize. Fortified positions that need to be reduced. The specifics are different. Defensive shields instead of walls, vacuum instead of air, orbital positions instead of hilltop fortresses. But the core strategic challenge is identical. How do you systematically break an enemy's fixed defensive position? And military engineers in 2525 CE are still learning from historical examples, including yours. Not because your specific techniques are still relevant. They're not. The technology gap is too vast. But because your systematic approach is timeless. The methodology you pioneered, analysis, multiple attack vectors, mathematical calculation, patient execution, That translates across any technology level. A military history instructor on a training station orbiting Europa is teaching a class on siege fundamentals. The students are from a dozen different colony worlds, training to become space warfare engineers. The instructor's holographic display shows a progression: ancient Assyrian siege operations, medieval sieges, industrial-era sieges, contemporary orbital assaults. Your name appears early in the timeline. Ashur-nadin, circa 855 BCE Earth. The instructor explains. Ancient Mesopotamian engineer who systematized siege warfare. Before him, sieges were largely improvised. After him, they were professional operations with predictable methodologies. He created the template we're still using 3,700 years later. Different tools, same thinking. One student, a kid from Titan Colony, age 17, whose ancestors left Earth 8 generations ago, raises his hand. Instructor, what happened to this guy? Did he become famous? Rich? The instructor checks the historical database. Records are fragmentary. He died around 821 BCE, apparently of respiratory disease common in ancient metalworkers. Some evidence suggests he retired early and spent his final years documenting his knowledge. His manual was used for centuries, but eventually lost. We only have fragments of his actual work, recovered by archaeologists much later. The instructor pauses. He was apparently successful by the standards of his time: high status, family, estate. But his civilization collapsed about 200 years after his death. Everything he worked for, the empire, the cities, the culture, all of it gone. Only his techniques survived. Another student asks, so did his work matter? The instructor considers. 3,700 years later, we're learning from him. Millions of military engineers across human history learned from him or learned from people who learned from him. His innovations influenced the entire development of siege warfare and, by extension, military engineering generally. But did he personally benefit? No. Did his empire benefit long-term? No. Did human knowledge benefit? Absolutely. Whether that counts as mattering depends on your perspective. The class moves on to orbital dynamics and shield penetration mathematics. But that question, did it matter, echoes. You spent your life serving an empire that's been dust for millennia. You struggled with guilt that no one remembers. You tried to document moral complexity that was lost. But your techniques are being taught to engineers who will work among the stars. The eternal present. You are Ashur-nadin, and you are 7 years old, standing in your father's workshop in Kulhu, watching him repair a damaged battering ram. The story is beginning again, as it always does. The cycle perpetuates. But now, across 3,000 years of human history, we can see the whole shape of your life and its echoes. You were brilliant, you were dutiful, you revolutionized warfare. You struggled with what you'd done. You tried to preserve both your knowledge and your conscience. You succeeded at the first and failed at the second. You served an empire that vanished. You created techniques that endured. You counted the cost, but no one remembered that you counted. You were human, complex, troubled, and ultimately forgotten as a person, while being remembered as a template. Was it worth it? That's the question you never answered, lying on your deathbed, and the question that 3,000 years of history can't answer either. Your techniques helped build and maintain an empire that brought relative peace and prosperity to millions for a while. They also killed tens of thousands directly and contributed to the suffering of hundreds of thousands more. They advanced human knowledge and human destructive capacity simultaneously. They made you wealthy and gave you nightmares. They outlived your empire, your culture, your language, and even your name, surviving as principles, as patterns, as ways of thinking that humans keep rediscovering, because the problems you solved keep recurring. And here's what's haunting. You're still with us. Every military engineer who thinks systematically about breaking defensive positions is channeling your intellectual legacy, whether they know your name or not. Every siege in history, from Damascus to Leningrad to cyberspace attacks on encrypted networks, follows patterns you established. You didn't just design siege engines, you designed a way of thinking about conflict that became permanent. But the moral weight you tried to preserve, that warning about human cost, that insistence on counting casualties alongside victories, that late-life wisdom that walls protect people, and breaking walls means breaking protection, that was lost. The technique survived, the conscience didn't. And maybe that's the real tragedy of your story. You were right about the importance of remembering the cost, but you failed to make that knowledge as durable as your engineering innovations. So here you are, everywhere and nowhere. In every algorithm planning military operations, in every historical example taught to military students, in every systematic approach to reducing fortifications. Present but invisible, influential but forgotten, eternal but dead. You wanted to be remembered for counting the cost. Instead, you're remembered for designing the tools. And the cost keeps mounting, siege after siege, wall after wall, city after city, down through the centuries, while the techniques you created continue their work, efficient and effective and empty of the guilt you carried. The story ends. The story never ends. You are Ashur Nadin. You will always be Ashur Nadin. And somewhere, right now, someone is learning from you without knowing your name, using your genius without carrying your weight. The knowledge persists, the wisdom was lost, and the walls keep falling. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, remember Ashur Nadin. Remember that behind every technical innovation is a human being, complex and flawed. Remember that knowledge without wisdom can persist for millennia, and maybe that's not always good. Remember that the questions he couldn't answer, about worth, about cost, about whether brilliant work in service of destruction can ever be fully right. Those questions remain, echoing down through history, still waiting for someone to answer them differently. Sleep well, behind your walls, safe from the siege engines that someone, somewhere, is still designing. If you found this story thought-provoking, please like, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts about innovation, responsibility, and the weight of genius. Where are you watching from tonight? Until next time, sleep peacefully.